All right, everyone. Sunday night, real reefing with yours truly, Mark Callahan, Mr. Saltwater Tank. Thanks for being here on a Sunday night. This is where book smarts meets the road at the School of Hard Knocks. What actually happens when you get out of the studio, you build tanks, you coach people with tanks, you have several of your own tanks. We're talking about coral placement for the long haul tonight. Because, how's it going to be when you don't love your fish anymore because you love coral more? Let's take the poll. If you love your corals more than your fish, it's okay. The fish can't hear you. They don't see the results. If you love your fish more than you love your coral, if you love your coral more than you love your fish, raise your hand. If you love the coral more, then you raise your fish. I can't talk tonight. Who loves the coral more than they love their fish? Raise your hand. Let's do a hand check. All right, we got some honest people in the room. A couple of you. Everyone else doesn't want to answer. Okay. Everyone knows the truth. You love your coral more because you're a reefer. There are a couple of you probably love your fish more because you're a fish only with live rock person. That's cool. To each your own. But we're talking about coral placement for the long haul tonight. I've had lots of tanks. I've had tanks for years, even though it might seem like I go through tanks pretty quickly. I've had tanks long enough. The corals go from frags to big colonies. And what I've learned along the way has taught me so much about where I place my coral when they're a little frag. Because you get the little frag and you may be like, is this thing ever going to grow? I'm just going to slap it somewhere because I can always move it around later. Or I don't know. I don't even know if this thing's going to make it. I'll just put it somewhere. And then you forget about it, and then hopefully, like happens to me a lot of times, it encrusts, and then you can't move it. So I'm going to educate you on what I've learned about placing coral for the long haul, and how to make your tank really beautiful as well. There's a fair amount of science behind coral placement, and then there's a fair amount of art as well. I've seen lots of tanks out there, and some of them just look like coral are just chunked in there, and I'm like, okay. Anyone can buy a lot of coral and chunk it in a tank, but when things are strategically placed, you know how they're going to grow or how they have grown and someone put it there on purpose, that's when I'm like, now that's a reef tank. That's really cool. All right. Look, when I first started in saltwater tanks, there were no coral. There was xenia at best. This is 1989. That's my first tank, the 75-gallon Oceanic with the under gravel filter and the fluorescent light hanging out of the back. Look, we didn't have it, so we didn't have these problems. We were just trying to keep fish alive, and most of us weren't really good at it. But you're here to learn about coral placement for the long haul. Now, when you first start your tank, you set it up and you go, wow, look at all that room. We've got all this room for coral. It's amazing. I'm never going to run out of room in this tank. It's huge. And then here's a little secret. Within 6 months max, a tank's going to feel small. Even if it's not full of coral, it's still going to feel small. It's just going to be like, wish I had a little more room. Happens every time. So here's a word of advice. You're planning your build, you're planning your next build, and you're like, okay, I can go for a 235 or I can go for a 285. Go for the 285. You're going to go for a 7-foot tank or an 8-foot tank. Go for the 8-foot tank. Make it work. There are ways to do this. You don't have to have all the lights at the beginning of your build for an 8-foot tank because maybe all you can do is afford all the lights for the 7-foot tank. That's fine. Go ahead and get started because you're going to love the extra space and time. This happened to me. The last tank that I built for the client back in January. It's now April. He's already like, yeah, I should have taken your advice and gone a little bit bigger. So, first lesson. It may seem like a lot, but it's really going to end up feeling cramped very quickly. You wish you had a little room. Now, some of you may be at this stage where your tank is blank. You've got a couple corals in there, maybe, maybe not, and you're like, okay, now what? Some of you are midstream. Things are growing, things are starting to look good, and you're seeing the results and you're happy. And then some of you are maybe here. By the way, that's the same tank you just saw about a year later. Everything is stuffed together. There's really no swimming room for fish. How would you even begin to frag anything? In the case of this reefer, this was actually I took this tank once, and is that the same corals? Okay. So I actually took this, not long after this phase, pretty much mowed it down for him because he couldn't stand to do it himself. And then everything grew back. And then it was here. At this point, he had built the dream house. I was building him his next tank, and he sold this system off. Point is, wherever you are in your saltwater tanks, your reef tanks life, there are lessons to be learned about coral placement, especially if you're at this phase when you're like, I want a new coral, or I want to hack a bunch of stuff back, but I don't want to just put the same thing back there that I had. Where do I go with it? All right, here's the thing. Most of us learned that when you're planing coral, or you're going to place coral, it looks like this. SPS go on top up here, LPS, kind of go around here, and softies go on the bottom, and if you're a stickhead, just don't even put the softies in the tank. Look, this is okay. That's very basic, by the book type of advice. Here's the thing. If you set up your tank like this, where you got SPS up high, and you got maybe some SPS here, but LPS kind of here and down, and then softies tucked in the corner, you know what happens to your tank? It ends up looking like Neapolitan ice cream. You got your strawberry, and then you got a hard line to vanilla, and you got a hard line to the chocolate. Ice cream sounds good right now. If any of you are enjoying ice cream while you're listening to this webinar, I'm jealous. Okay, there's like 3 distinct phases, which for some of you, you may be okay with that. For me, I'm like, that's not how it looks in nature. You don't believe me? Take a look. This is Fiji, just so you know. This is how Mother Nature places her coral. Check it out. Now, something I want you to keep an eye on is how much intermingling there is going on, besides the fact that these corals are big and they're all over one another. For example, that tabling coral coming up right there, that's about 3 feet across, just to give you a sense of scale. But look, this SPS is right next to this brain right there. There's some zoas. Those are those orange things crammed up underneath there. There's a leather coral back over there. Here's another big brain. Hey, nice cleaner wrasse as well. This is a cleaning station at the top of this rock. Let's watch that again, because none of us are traveling right now, and we'd love to be there, including me. Look, just get an idea of how mix and matched everything is. It's not chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. It's not Neapolitan ice cream. Everything is spread in there. Now, some of you may say, look, Mark, this is the reef. This isn't our tank. Okay, I get that. And I'm willing to bet you would like to have your tank look like that, even at a small level. So why not look at this and take lessons from it? And man, that looks really good. Should be back there in October. I'm excited. Miss traveling, miss being out of the ocean. The ocean is definitely calling me. All right, what do we take from this? This is more of how Mother Nature does it. All the different colors of the rainbow, everything's mixed and matched, and no apparent rhyme or reason. That's cool, right? This looks good. Variety is clearly the spice of life. That's how Mother Nature does it. Let's make our reef tank looks like that. Now, most people, when they go to pick coral, they go, okay, I get some softies, I get some LPS, and I get some SPS, and then I just kind of go in there, and it's like, all right, whatever. I just stick it wherever I can stick it. The first step in coral placement for the long haul goes into what type of coral you're putting in your tank. Now, I'm not just talking about softies, LPS, and SPS. Yes, that's part of it, but here's where the science kind of breaks down, and real reality, what I've learned on the road, starts to come in. There's all these different types of coral within a family. For example, SPS, there are different growth types, different shapes as well. Bushy corals, encrusting corals, sticks, tabling, and then there's all different types of colors. So let's break this down. This is the bushy type of SPS. Okay, it grows kind of like a bush or a shrub. If for those of you that are in the desert, it kind of looks like, tumbleweed. For example, pink lemonade. What a great classic, old school, but hard to beat coral. This looks like a bush. It's pretty tight together. The branches are tight together. It looks like a bush. This is more of a branching piece. This looks like a tree. It's got a trunk, and then things go out from there. Example, the green slimer. Wow, that was my green slimer. It was not too long after getting started. Again, it comes up like this, and then it spreads out. That's a much different look than the coral we just saw. Then we have these big branching guys. One of my favorite types of SPS are these guys, big branches that are far apart. Look how much white space, look how much sunlight is going to get through this. We'll talk about that later tonight. Okay. Here's an example. This is a purple stag, maybe a tort. of some sort. Look at that. We got a branch going off here. We got a branch going off here. You could literally stick your head between there. All kinds of space. Here's another piece. This is actually the same piece a couple months later. Again, lots of space between the branches. Here's one of my favorites, the Harita. Look at all the space between the branches. This looks much different than other types of SPS. Check this out. Here's another example of this. We've got a bushy SPS there. We've got some plating SPS, those Montiporas. We'll talk about that. We're going to revisit this tank in a minute. And then we've got some big branching, this green slimer down here mixed in over on the kind of about 4 o'clock. In the bottom right of this photo, among that green Monty cap, that's a big piece as well. So this looks cool, right? Lots of different types. Variety is the spice of life. We're not just buying SPS and like, I just throw it in the tank. We're buying it because we're being strategic about it. Encrusting SPS. These guys have a lot of utility in the tank, including some with flow that I'll talk about towards the end of the evening. The point is we get all different types of coral inside of just buying SPS. So if you're going to go buy SPS, don't just be like, okay, I'm going to buy SPS. Think about different types of SPS when you go to buy it. Now look, not everyone's a stickhead, but even if you're an LPS person, this thing comes down to you as well. There's encrusting LPS, there's one that grow like trees, and then there's some that like to live in the sand like this Lobo. Here is a nice chalice. It's Miami Hurricane, the smiling chalice. It was in my old tank. Using encrusting over the rock. All right? That's one type of growth pattern. Then we have the Gonopora, grows like trees. Looks much different than a chalice. And then the Philia. This guy I got when it was not that big. When I sold it with the tank, I think that's what it went. It was this big. I had it in the corner of my tank because it stung everything. I'll talk about that in a minute. Now, for you Softie types, if you're a Softie type, raise your hand. It's okay. I won't call you out by name. For some reason, all these people are like, I like Softies. There's nothing wrong with Softies. They're cool. They have lots of utility. Okay, so No? Okay. A couple of Softie bubbles in. All right. All this applies to you as well. We got some that grow like trees, some that encrust, and then you get some with all different types of colors. So there's 3 big factors once the coral is in your tank. So once you get it, once you've dipped it, or if you're quarantining your coral, there's 3 big things you need to be thinking about. First of all, light. Coral we're putting in our tank is photosynthetic, unless you're keeping a non-photosynthetic coral, in which I'm going to say, good luck. They're pretty tough to actually keep successfully. All right, light needs. What are the needs of this coral? Most of the time people go, is it a high light, medium light, or a low light coral? Okay, that has some amount of things to do with your placement, but that leaves on something that's massively overlooked, hugely overlooked. It is the light that it will or it will not inhibit. People do not think of this when they put coral in their tank. It happened to a client. It's happened to multiple of my clients. What I'm talking about shade. Check this out. Remember that tank I just showed you with those big money caps on top? This is the same tank. Look at this big green money up top. Look how much shade is being cast underneath this big plating Monty. Some people say, that's pretty cool, right? They like the big money. My friends from Canada, you know who you are. Look, if you're into Monties, that's fine. I don't like them because they tend to get weedy and they do this. Look at all this space that's wasted. You can do nothing with it because of this money cap up top. To me, that's not cool. I want to do something with this real estate. And to give you a sense of scale, that's like 1 foot by 1 foot of this tank that's just gone. There's nothing you can do with it. All right? So shade. How is the coral going to grow once you know the growth type? How is it going to create shade? For example, here's a top shot of that Monty. Okay, on one level, it's cool. Like it spirals, it's got many levels. This tank was a very successful tank. Personally, I'm staring at that Hawkins Enchilada right down there at the bottom, about 6 o'clock. Man, I love that coral. All right, but look at this big Monty. Look at how much shade it's creating. Here's the reverse of it. Again, all that darkness, nothing that you can do with it. Here's moving around the tank. This is a Peninsula Tank. For the record, this hammer that's down below it is 25 years old now. I kept it in my tank for about a year while this client was moving and rebuilding their system. So this thing is, that hammer, to give you a sense of scale, is 2 feet across. The problem with this, where I'm going at this point, is we have all this shade. It's creating a problem for this client. They said, Mark, come rip this thing out. I said, gladly. Here's me removing that Monty, that whole piece of rock. I just picked the whole thing up, all the way down in the tank. Watch this. Okay, it's a nice looking piece. If you want to frag, it's no longer with us. They got fragged out and gave away. Now look how much real estate we have. Kaboom! Look at all that open space. You can put a new coral in your tank, hopefully not put in something that's going to create a lot of shade. Here's a reverse instant replay. There goes the shrimp. See you, buddy. You get to hang out. Watch how much light is suddenly created as we move this big old Monty that plates and shades things. This can happen with other corals as well. All of a sudden, we have lots of light, lots of new opportunities for even this old established tank. All right, here's the after result of this. Here's the sad part of this photo. Number one, look at the hammer on the lower right. This 25-year-old piece of hammer, which you got when it was that big, by the way. Half of it, not half of it, okay, but this arm of it, this plate piece of it, is dead. There's no more coral there because it got shade, and some of it's even encrusted with coral, and it's been dead for so long because it's been shaded by that damn bonnie cat. 25-year-old hammer, weedy bonnie cat. All right, here's a close-up. So some of this is going to grow back. You can still see some flesh there, but overall it's not. So that being said, shade can hurt you, but here's the thing. Here's the goal. Shade can be your friend. There's some good opportunities when it's done correctly. It creates shadows for lower light coral. Not every coral wants to get hammered with light. Some corals like lower light. Now, most of you aren't going to want to turn down your lights. I've seen it time and time again. The thought of like turning down your lights, everyone's like, no, no way. Corals aren't getting enough light. But so you don't have to turn down your lights. You can simply place the coral in a place that's getting shade. I'll talk about this with a real life example in a minute. It also creates safe places for fish. Some fish like to hide out underneath things. Some fish are going to be much happier and you've given them a low light place to hang out. It's also a fantastic place for non-photosynthetic corals. You can actually do something with the shade now. Now, I was talking about non-photosynthetics earlier. I'll get more into that later on. Hold that thought. All right. Here is the first tank. The first tank? Yeah, I think so. I think this was the first tank that I was paid to build. This is a 210-gallon tank. Was in Austin, Texas. Lots of coral in here. Lots of things going on. But here's where I want to draw your attention. Here's this big old Lobo. I think I have a similar Lobo right in this tank. Great Lobo, by the way, if you're looking for a great starter LPS. Those orange and blue Lobos are fantastic. So there's a Lobo that usually is a low light coral, but it's mid tank. It's mid height in the tank and it's right underneath the radion. Therefore, it should be getting lots of light. Now let's zoom in for a closer look. It is right underneath these branching LPS. Here's the gold with this. I didn't put it under a plating LPS. I put it under a branching SPS because that way light can get through, but through the branches, the light gets diffused. So even though it's sitting right underneath the radion, and this was before diffusers, even before the wide angle lenses, this coral would be getting a lot of light if there wasn't this branching SPS, placed strategically right above it. Shade can be your friend. You can use the coral once you know how it's going to grow. You say it's going to create a lot of shade or not a lot. You can use that for yours as something for you. Look further down below the Lobo. That's a chalice. Usually those don't need a lot of light. It's right underneath the radion again, but it's getting light that's getting broken up because of the SPS above it. And a little bit of that Lobo above it as well. There's some weedy Monty cap, which he got rid of and wished he never put in there. The point is you can use light when you know how coral is going to grow. You can use shade to your advantage. It's not all bad. Now, non-photosynthetics. I talked about those when we first got started. They don't care about light. That's why they're called non-photosynthetic coral. They're going to come out in the shade. They're going to come out in the light. It doesn't matter. Now, the trick with this is wherever you put them, you have to be able to reach them to feed them. And oh, by the way, NPS are one of the few corals I will actually feed, and I don't broadcast feed them. I don't dump a bunch of the food in the tank and just let it blow around. I get a Julien's thing, that's a feeder. I'll dissolve some of that same coral food in some water, suck it up, and then I'll squirt it right at these guys. It's called target feeding. So if I'm going to target feed these guys, you have to be able to get to them. You don't want to just throw food in your tank and broadcast feed. You want to target feed these guys. You have to be able to get to them, though. But they're great to use to fill in caves and dark areas. Let's go to an example. Here is my 450-gallon tank. There's that harita that I showed you earlier. Again, big branching growth patterns. It's letting light through, but the non-photosynthetics don't care. But it's going to let me through when I want to get the feeder in there. And it fills in this shade. There's this big shading area. There's nothing I can do with it but put some dendros in there. Certain type of fish like the shade as well. They're going to appreciate that you're giving them some shade. This is a fathead or a blotched, sorry, this is a Sunburst Anthias. The fathead's the Sunburst Anthias. Love this as well. In Fiji, I see them down around 80 feet. They're underneath ledges where there's no real light, very low light. So when you put them in your tank, they like to hang out in the shade. So you can use your coral growth, you can use your coral placement to do it. Anthias will be happy to be in the shade, especially some of those deep waters. They'll be happy to be down, that you gave them some shade as well. Mandarins, all those fish will be happy that they have some shade. All right, growth types, different ways that the corals grow. Now, we're going to go back to this. We're revisiting growth type a little bit because we're starting to work our way through how we're going to place this coral. We talked about platers, we talked about encrusters, big growth patterns in terms of branches with SPS, bushy things like that, encrusting corals. This is one of my favorites. Encrusting SPS are a great way to do some really fun stuff with flow, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. This is actually, keep this shot in your mind for just a minute. This is the same branch. This was a sunset monument on the end. I think that was supposed to be a rainbow. Maybe wrong about that. On the end, further down there, here's the same coral, same branch with the sunset out on the end, but my sea bay anemone, which is right over here behind me, still with me, it's grown so big, it's overtaken that branch. The Monty that was down in there, that encrusting Monty, he's gone. He got no light. He died. And this sunburst is out at the end. So fun little cool thing that you can do with coral. In this case, what was really neat about watching this thing grow is it just started growing over itself. Like it started getting lumpy instead of just, since it didn't have anywhere to grow. It's a neat thing to do. So encrusters have certain places they go. I'll talk about that more. I just wanted to show you another type of SPS that people often overlook. Now, you LPS people, you Softie people, Gorgonians, great soft coral. Make sure they're photosynthetic, but they're a fantastic soft coral to add some motion even to your SPS dominant tanks. So Anthids, they encrust over the rocks. LPS, a lot of them just like to hang out on the sand bed, but you have to know that before you get going. A variety wins, and as we said, when you know the growth type, you can forecast your growth. You know where this coral is going to grow. What is it going to look like in the end? You have to know that, and you have to think about that when you go to place it. It helps you predict shading or lack thereof. All right, let's go to another example. Here's a small tank. This is a 90-gallon tank that I built here in Nashville, Tennessee. Right up here, up top, is this big green Slimer. Love that coral. It's a great starter coral, by the way, if you're looking for starter SPS. That is a big old piece that grows really wide. It doesn't send out thin branches. It's not a bushy. It sends out these big, thick branches with lots of space between them. Even though I have this SPS right here, right below it, that's getting broken up, with the light is getting diffused by the coral above it, that's okay because I know that SPS below it is more of a medium light type of SPS. So I'm going to put it there. I'm not going to put it up high. I'm going to put it down in this middle section where it's getting some shading. And that's where I know it's going to be happy, but it's still getting enough light. All right. Overall, this creates a different look to your tank because you're not just SPS up top, LPS or Softies in the middle, and then Softies down on the bottom. Slimer makes for a dramatic centerpiece of the tank, but it doesn't shade out all the light underneath it. That worked because I knew how this thing was going to grow. And then it also worked with everything else in the tank because I knew how that was going to grow. This elegance that's down here about 6 o'clock towards the back of the tank, I knew it was going to get big and it didn't need tons of light because they're found in the muck where its visibility is really poor. So I pushed it to the back of the tank. This elkhorn over there on the left, I knew it was going to grow and kind of take off, so I put it up top so it wouldn't get in the way of things. All right, aggression issues. Here's the thing. How do corals decide who wins and who loses in nature and in your tank? They fight. They go after it. They sting. They fight each other for territory. They literally throw their stomachs on each other, and the one that's more aggressive digests the other one. How's that for plain fair? It's all a fight for territory. There's only so much real estate out there, and they're going to have to fight for it. They have to duke it out, much like the family vacation, for those of you that remember this. It starts like this, and it lasts for about 10 minutes. After they've asked you, are you there yet? Then they start bickering with each other and picking at each other. If you have kids, you know how this goes. You place things together, they're not going to play well for very long. Case in point. This is the Samacora, yellow Samacora on the left, then Acan and Shinata on the right. Probably the meanest LPS coral that's out there. If the Acan and Shinata gets close to anything, it doesn't matter. Acan's going to win. In this case, it digested half of this Samacora because they touched. So you have to space things out a bit if you know about their aggression issues. The Philia. This is one that I had. Again, I grew it from a little piece that got quite big, but it's isolated. It's out on its own. It's got space around it. There's nothing really close to it. That's cool. It can make not only a cool looking piece of coral in your tank, but a cool look. But it's only going to work if you know that you need to do it. Some people are going to look at it and be like, that's pretty, and you're going to be, the experienced reefer will look at it and go, I bet that's there because it's going to knock out anything close to it. Case in point, we got a little close to my war coral. It threw out these sweepers in the digested part of the war coral. All right, at some point though, like this tank, what do you do with this? Everything's fully grown in and it's dense. All right, some level, you just have to let it go. They're going to fight, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Or you start fragging, start cutting things down. Now in this owner's case, he couldn't stand to frag anything. He swore he would never frag it. I actually had to come in and do it for him, and then he got over it and made lots of frags. Now, some things like to be close to one another, and they don't care. They're not going to fight. You can really use this to your advantage to create some really cool effects of things all together. Gonopora. They don't care about each other. You can put them right next to one another like in the shot. Everybody's happy. Not a problem. They're cool with it. Certain types of LPS. This is the client's meat coral garden. It works because he knows that meat corals aren't going to bother each other. They don't have those big sweepers. Their tentacles are about this big. They're not going to burn anything else unless one falls on top of the other. This was his meat coral garden. This was actually his Christmas card one year because we had red and green. He got a copper band butterfly. It proceeded to eat these meat corals, and he said, I'm over the meat corals. I like the copper band better. There's one for you fish people out there. So he gave him to another one of my clients. Here's one that you can really use that will fill in gaps in your tank when it comes to no aggression issues. Zoanthids. These are some eagle eyes. This is a great, you can get like 30 eyes of eagle eyes, 30 polyps for like $20. People, a lot of times, will just give them away. People freak out when they see this. They're like, ooh, those corals are touching it. Those zoas are going to kill that Monty. Even though I don't like Monties, it's not. They're going to grow around it. They're never going to grow over it. And it helps fill in the gaps in your aquascaping, in your coral placement. So if you have some gaps, you don't know what you do with it, put some zoas in there. You can even epoxy over zoas if you put a SPS on a frag. Everything will be fine, all right? But as I said earlier, some things have sweepers. If you have sea corals that are getting stung and you don't know why, look at your tank at night. This was a shot of a chalice throwing out some big sweepers. Some of these chalices can throw out like 10-inch sweepers. They literally reach out and touch someone. You have to know that before you place them. Give them room, but if you're seeing that bleaching, it may be getting stung. Look at your tank at night. It's pretty cool, and you may see some sweepers. All right. The best defense when it comes to aggression is distance. Now, some of you want that grown-in look right away. I get it. I understand. But be patient. It will grow in. Gaps are not necessarily a bad thing. You don't have to have everything go together. Leave some gaps. That's telling me, as I'm looking at your tank, that you're willing to be patient. You want to see less coral that's bigger growing in because it's taking time to touch one another as opposed to cramming your tank full of coral, just buying a bunch of coral and putting them close together. You need to anticipate where it's going to go. For example, back to the old Monty cap. Client really wanted a Monty. This is the back of his tank. I was like, look, you're never going to put anything back there. If you do put it back there, it's because you don't like it. So go ahead and put the Monty. It'll eat up this corner. Nothing's going to grow anyway. Who cares about the shade? Throw it back there. And it made for a pretty cool look to have that back corner all used up by the Monty. Here's a little walkthrough of the tank. You can see that big Monty's back there taking up the space there. Red Dragon, bushy coral casting a lot of shadows, but nothing really needs any light beneath it. Oh, I hate black tank. Oh, Montifora undotted, one of my favorites. Nice encrusting coral that we placed down low. Big branching SPS up high to let light through. We've got some bushy SPS mixed in there as well. Oh, the Bandito, the Bandit Angel. Forgot we had him. And then this client has the best tasting fish. I forgot that he had all these good ones. And then that nice big Hawkins there as well. So you're getting the point here. We have things placed strategically. We know how they're going to grow. We know how they're going to interact with one another. And we want to create a variety. Now, we've talked a lot about light to this point. The thing about it is there's another key factor when it comes to coral growth, which is flow. Some people say flow is more important than light. I wouldn't go that far, but it can have some big effects on your coral. Look, your corals need it. They need flow. It brings in oxygen. It takes away waste. It brings in carbon dioxide. Like, it can do all that. So what kind of flow does the coral need? We hear that asked a lot. People ask about the lighting needs and they ask about the flow needs. Flow can affect growth, not just the speed of growth, but also the direction of the growth. Check this out. Take a minute, look at this slide. Where do you think the flow is coming from in this tank? If you guess that it's coming from the left, going this way, that's right. That's exactly it. So this is a bird's nest coral. It should grow kind of bushy like this and be pretty dense. That's why it's called bird's nest. But it's growing like this. The wind is getting blown this way. The flow is pushing it this way. It looks like it's getting wind blown because literally it is by flow. So some people might like this, like that's kind of cool. But if you're an enthusiast, you like that piece to be big and ball like it is, like you see in pictures. It's not going to happen when the flow is coming from one direction and it's all in one direction and it's all this direction. It can happen this direction as well. Now you can use this to your advantage. A lot of times you need to put corals close to power heads because there's just power heads take up space and your rock work is maybe going to be close to power heads. You can't put your coral so far away from the power head that it gets no flow. So how do you use that to your advantage? Encrusters are a great coral for high direct flow. Why? Because they don't care where the flow is coming from. They're going to spread out in all directions anyway. You can use this in high flow areas in your tank, like in front of power heads, where you couldn't put any other type of coral. You couldn't even put a Softie there because it would just look like it's getting blown over all the time. Put an encruster. They work really well. Here's an example. This is the corner of my 450-gallon tank. Here you go. There's an MP60. This is actually further down. So that's an MP40. That's about 6 inches away and about 3 inches up from this piece. That is a Gonostraea. That is going to encrust on this rock. It doesn't care about flow. Now, I couldn't put any other SPS there because it's just going to grow like this. We just saw in the photo because the MP40 is just pushing flow this way. That encruster, it's going to grow all over that rock and not care. So encrusters are a great way to fill in high flow areas where you can't put anything else. That works because you know how it's going to grow and you know what lights need as well. It all goes together. It's not like one thing wins. And of course, the color thing. One of the reasons I bet you got into saltwater aquariums, whether it's for the fish, whether it's for the coral, is for the color. All different colors of the rainbow. Like you can get this. These things look fantastic, right? People buy corals just for their colors alone. Nothing wrong with that. The point is, why not use all the colors of the rainbow? I've seen plenty of tanks when it's like, this is a bunch of green. And look, green is easy to get. It's pretty easy to grow. Unfortunately, green corals tend to be the hardiest. Some of these other corals tend to be more picky, but mix it up. You can get it all. And that's not just SPS or LPS. Look, here's a nice, pretty LPS that has lots of colors in it. Look, mix all this up. Here's a nice Scully. You got different colors inside of the coral. All the colors of the rainbow. Here's a pack from Worldwide Corals. The point is, you can get that with all these different corals. At the end of the day, make it look like this. Mix the thing up. We've got purples, we've got greens, we've got teals, we've got yellows, you've got purples, you've got reds. I mean, we have it all. To me, this is a nice looking tank because there's lots of variety and lots of different areas. One of the big ones is color. All right, so you got your coral. Now what? Let's recap this. You're going to start with the lighting needs. Is it high light, low light, medium light? You're going to get an idea with that. Then once you know how it's going to grow, you can think about shade. Is this creating a lot of shade that's going to help me? This is going to create a lot of shade that's going to hurt me. Then you know you have different types of corals within the families. Different growth types, different lighting needs as well, and then aggression as well. Are they going to damage something that gets close to them? Do they not care if they touch something? Can you use both of those things to your advantage? Maybe you want to nuke some coral in your tanks. You're like, hey, this piece is really aggressive. I'm going to put it right next to that one over here that's encrusted that I can't get off. I'll just let this aggressive one burn that thing down, and you sit there and go, bye-bye. And flow issues as well. Where is your flow coming? Not only what kind of flow does it need, where is it coming from? How might that affect growth? Color. Get a variety. Don't be a groupie. Don't put all your reds next to your reds or your purples next to purples or reds next to purples around your tank. Mix it up. As I'm working through all this, I'll go down this list and then I'll look and say, what color is this? And I'll go, okay, I want to put it there, but now I have a lot of blues here or I have a lot of greens. I want to try to mix things up because I want it to look with like the variety, like the Skittles we saw earlier on. And lastly, don't fear the gaps when it comes to placing your coral. I'm not a fan of buying a whole bunch of coral, cramming it all together to making your tank look full, even though it's young. Get some frags, get some mini colonies if you want. Space them out, let them grow. Let's add some big colonies that have lots of width, maybe height as well, very dense if they grow that way. To me, that's more impressive than a whole bunch of little things that didn't get very big because they're all stinging one another and creating problems. All right. That's how I think about coral placement for the long haul. It happens every tank that I've ever done. As I work through them, there's some that still, I get them wrong. I'm like, this thing's encrusted. I really wish it would have been over there. The other thing that happens is you get really successful with your tank, and then you want to find some other type of coral, maybe that Monty or whatever you got it started. When you first got started, you're like, it was cool back then, but now I'm confident that I can keep this coral that's more of my colors. It's maybe harder to keep. Maybe it's going to give you more money if you decide you want to frag and sell it. So you take those other things out. You still need to go through this list and think about that. But using what I taught you tonight will help you avoid having a bunch of coral that, one, you don't want, or put in the wrong place that it's inhibiting in your tank, or you're changing the growth, or at the end of the day, looking at it and go, I really wish I didn't put that there. All right, with that, let's flip it over to you guys and gals' questions. This is the parts it's where you come in, work for your money. Raise your hand if you have a question. If you don't want to interact live, that's cool. Ask a question down there in the chat window as well. I will I will talk with you live. I will answer written questions too. I'm going to turn it over to you all. Let's keep it on topic for coral placement questions. So let's start with that. Marty, you got your hand down up. I'm going to unmute you, Marty. Make sure you unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
I can.
I got a question about the corals. I have corals in my tank, but it seems like all of the cleaners want to try to knock them over, and because they're smaller coral, I start out with I have a smaller tank, and so everything keeps drawing to them, and it knocks them over in the middle of the night, and I'm having to constantly replace the coral back to where I want it. Is there a safe way to put it in there without where something can't knock it over constantly?
Yeah, so great question, Marty. So there's some give and a take on placing your coral but not letting it fall off. Because here's the thing. And maybe you want to place that coral there and see how it does. Especially if you're new, you're like, I think it goes here in terms of placement. but I don't know. So you want to stick it there, but you don't want to be married to it. So there's a couple ways you can do it. One, you can jam it down in a rock. Sometimes you can wedge down in there where it's not going to get taken away or knocked off. The other thing you can do is put a little bit, I mean, you got to put enough super glue that it's going to hold it, but you don't have to go crazy on it. At the same time, you don't want to put just like little dot because that's not going to do much. So, you want some that'll hold it. You put it there, but you know that if you can get some leverage underneath it, you can pop it off if you decide that you want to move it, but that will hold it in place long enough so you can see how it does and it won't get taken away. Now, some people like to use epoxy. I'm not a fan of epoxy, Marty, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I found that it takes a long time to set up. And usually what happens is something comes and knocks it off, or your flow knocks it off before that epoxy is set up. Now, if you want to use epoxy, what I do is I get the epoxy. If it's too far, you got to mix it together. I know where I want to put the thing. Then I put some glue on the rock, on the coral plug, and then I glue everything together with the epoxy. That way the glue is holding it in place until the epoxy has a chance to set up. The thing with epoxy, Marty, is once you set it there, you're very likely not getting it off, especially if you use any amount of it. So use the super glue, the gel type super glue, just enough that it's going to hold it, but not too much. Once you know where you want to put it, you know it's happy there. Look, then you can go in there and epoxy it, but make sure you use the glue with it. That's what I found the secret to get epoxy to actually hold. All right, great question. Let's go to Simon in Canada. Simon, you're with us every week. Thanks for being with us, Simon. What's your question?
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me. And I hope you really make more of these webinars. They're really, really awesome, informative. They're just really great. So actually, I'm going to try to sneak in a couple of questions here because it's something that you don't really talk about much. So my first question is about using a par meter. I know that Bulk Reef is really in favor of using a par meter. I don't see you talking about using a par meter for placing corals. And then my second question would be, I'm a really big sucker for Montes and LPS corals such as hammers and torches. What are your tips on putting those in if you have to have them, like either placing them lower in the tank or just having an island dedicated to those sort of Philia corals? Can you sort of go over that for us, please?
Yeah, so let's start with the Philias because I love those. You just saw a big one in the video. I will use those in a couple of places. One where there's not, I want to say shade, there's some shade, but since they tend to have a skeleton where the growth, the coral is out here, and then usually you get some amount of skeleton, it's usually a couple inches behind it. I'll use that to put that skeleton down in the rock in the shady part, and then let the fleshy part of the coral hang out. Even if it's just at the edge of the shade, that's a great way that I fill in gaps. Usually if you're getting shade as well, it's halfway down or lower down in the tank where those Euphyllias like to hang out. So that's a great use for them as well. Certainly love my torches. The things with hammers, it's more with torches. Torches really throw some sweepers out there and can reach out and touch things and sting it. But you put them next to other torches, it's not going to cause a problem. Hammers against torches usually is okay as well. I like hammer gardens. I like torch gardens. They're really cool. I found that I'm in a growing love of those. So you can mix and match those together and they won't care that they're touching one another. That's a great thing to do with those, as well as just putting some on the sand bed, especially a big wall hammer like the one you saw in the video. You put that thing in the sand bed. If it's sizable enough, or if you have the patience, then it will grow out to something big. It will become its own expanding island at all times. So that being said, what about Montes? I like to put them down low, like you saw in the video, in a corner, because they're probably going to grow anyway, because those things are weeds. I don't like to put them up high. Personally, I don't put Monte caps in the tank. Not a fan of those because of the reasons we talked about. Other Montes I love, Undata I love, Setosa I love. Two of my favorite Montes, Encrusting Montes, Sunset Monte, the rainbows, Confucia, all of those are great Montes as well. I just tend to stay away from the Monte plates because they get big. Every person I know that has had one, at the end they wish they hadn't put it in the tank. They're over it, and then they take it out. But if you're going to use it, a corner is a great place to put it. Great question, Simon. Now, par meters. Here's the thing about the par meters. one level, I like knowing your numbers. And then what I see once people know the numbers is they get lost in the numbers. They're like, oh, this pore here is 400. Every coral I have is SPS, therefore they all have to be at 400. Or that's way too much for anything other than SPS. My experience with that is not true. I've grown plenty of zoanthids on the top of rocks where they're getting hammered with pore. And I've grown plenty of corals in not a lot of light, where they maybe should get a lot of light. So do I like having the pore meter? Look, I have one. It's actually on loan right now to a client that reminds me I need to get it back. Look, I don't use it. You know, every now and then I'll look at it. I set up this tank and I didn't use it. I didn't set out the pore meter. I took pore readings on my tank once just to get an idea of where it was. And then I'm like, okay, it's more like, all right, so this is about where I am up top. I'm more curious about how things are falling off the bottom, because it may be that this section I think is not much light, but it actually is getting some light. So I'll put something else in there because I knew that. But overall, to me, with the lights that are out there now, they're spread out so much. People usually have the right amount of coverage. I don't get lost in the par. I put the coral really where I want it, where I would like to see it grow in terms of growth patterns and color, and then I let it go from there. So it's really more of a feel thing for me than a data thing. The one thing I do like about them is to show people that you don't have to crank up your LEDs high because they look dim to your eye. Your eye is a poor judge of brightness when it comes to the spectrum of light that our corals like in our tanks. It reinforces it every time I've blown my pore meter out to people. They're like, I got to turn them up, and I'm always turning them back down. Then they get to pore readings, and they're like, oh, it really is high. I'm like, there you go. Great question, Simon. Thanks for being with me. Mike, let's go some text questions here. Alex wants to know, I'd like to have bushy SPS grow even. Should I alternate the flow direction? Alex, yes, if they're getting strong flow from one direction. If they're close to a power head, water flow is pretty strong, and it's all coming from one direction, likely that your bushies are going to grow with that flow. So alternating flow, I like alternating flow in a tank to begin with. I like having two power heads on the tank, mix it up because the tides come and go in the ocean. It's also great for your SPS, your LPS, your Softies. Who wants to sit there and watch a Softie or LPS that's always getting blown this direction like it's getting knocked over in a hurricane or a tornado? You like to see things move around, flowing over, tumbling over one another. That's cool. So ideally, you would alternate your flow anyway, Alex. If you're not, I would recommend start doing it. All right, let's see here. I have a lady reefer question. 13 gallon, awesome. Want corals to grow slower because of lack of real estate. Is slower flow the way to go? Huh, I love that question because most people do not want their corals to grow slower. They can't grow fast enough. All right, Winona, how are some ways to get your coral to grow slower? A couple different ways. One, don't turn the lights on as long. Now, I'm willing to bet if you have a 13 gallon, the lights aren't dimmable. If they are dimmable, you can turn down their intensity. Or you can not leave them on as long. If the coral doesn't get as much light, then it's not going to grow as fast. The other thing that you can do, assuming your nutrient levels in your tank don't get out of hand, and for me, that's roughly 20 parts per million on nitrates, 1.0 on phosphates, don't do a water change. There's definitely plenty of anecdotal evidence I've run through with clients where not much is happening in their tank. Then they do a water change, and things just tend to take off because you're replenishing some trace elements as well as calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, things that corals need to grow. So if you don't do a water change, at some point they're not going to have those elements where they need to grow, and then they won't grow very fast. Now, you still may have to do a water change to keep them alive, but you don't have to constantly be doing big water changes or even consistent water changes. That can be a way to slow them down. At some point, though, you're going to reach the point of no return. You have to have some kind of water change or else they're not going to grow at all. Great question, though. I'm sure most people would love for their coral to grow quickly. Juan wants to know, if I'm starting a new mixed reef tank, what types would I start with first? Low light, highlight, any suggestions? All right, great question, Juan. This is something I do for my clients. I get the tank set up, I get it cycled, then it's time to put coral in the tank. Okay, how do you know if the tank's ready for corals? How do you not know if it's ready for corals? Really, it's a canary in a coal mine type of thing. You just have to put some corals in there and then see what happens. There's no marker in the tank where I can be like, ooh, that's happened. Now it's ready for corals. Now, I wait about a month just because I like the tank to get going. I like to get some biofilm going. Then I send that client a box of corals and say, put it in the tank, tell me what happens. And we just watch it. We want to see what goes. If the SPS die, but the LPS live, or everything does well, which is usually what happens, okay, then we're building confidence in the tank, and then we start putting more in. So what do I start clients with? A mix of things, LPS, SPS, and Softie. So I'll send them some zoanthids. Love those things. I will send them some torches or some hammers, and then SPS that are hardy, the Milka stylo, purple stylophora. I like that one, not the Pasillipora. You want to make sure it's a stylo. Green Slimer is another great hardy coral. Montipora undata Simon, Montipora setosa Simon, Mr. Monty Guy. All those are great starter corals. Put them in your tank and then just see what happens. Do they live? Do they die? Just because they died, if they all die, okay, maybe your tank isn't ready for coral. But if one of them dies, it's probably not enough of a data set to be significant. I would go get another one and then see what happens. And look, there's some give and take on this one as well. Some tanks just don't grow certain types of coral. For example, for years, I could never keep a chalice for no apparent reason. All the corals in the tank were doing really, really well, but chalices would die on me every single time. It happened in my 90, it happened in my 225, it happened in my 375. My 450 was the first tank that I had that would grow chalices. Made zero sense to me whatsoever when everything else was going well. So some corals just don't mix well in your tank. Don't take it personally. It may be that that's one type of coral that you just can't grow. All right, last text question for the moment, then we'll switch back to you live people. Paul wants to know, I don't hear anything about acants, placing and knowing their growth. Here's the first thing to know about acants, Paul. They always change color. I see plenty of good-looking acants out there, and I go, it's going to change color. It's probably going to end up blue and red or something else, but that's it. I don't buy acants because I know they're going to change colors. They're always going to disappoint me. If you are an acan person, those acants are found in very dirty water in lots of shade. So you can put them in cracks. They need some light, but they don't need tons. You don't need to put them up top. They're going to grow kind of like a mound that keeps going. They're not going to spread out much. So I like them for the shade. I don't buy them because I know they change colors. But when you do think about placement, partial shade, low light is fine. Don't let them be right under light. They're going to get hammered with direct light. And then just know they're going to grow like a dome and expand out from there. All right, with that, let's go over to live questions. Who else has a live question? Remember, unmute your microphone. And if the kids are screaming in the background, you can tell them to be quiet as well. Let's see here. A couple of you are connected on the web, but it doesn't say that you have a microphone. So let's keep looking here. Oh, Gabe is connected to audio, and he has a question. All right, Gabe N., it is all you. Have at it.
Hey, considering the different types of corals, like LPS, SPS, Softies, what are signs of too much, too little flow, and too much or too little light?
Great question. All right, how do you define too much and too little flow and light? Bleaching is one of those things that's tough when it comes to LPS and SPS coral. If the coral is dying off and it's losing flesh, it's probably not because you're overlighting it. Usually corals that bleach out from overlighting, especially LPS and SPS, those tend to just lose their color but still keep their flesh. So if that's happening to you, to me, that's an overlighting thing. If the thing is peeling off its flesh, and maybe because you're hammering it with flow, but I mean, look, you really have to be hammering the thing to really cause that to happen, literally blowing the flesh off the coral. LPS, they're more give and take with that. They may not extend all the way because they're getting too much flow. That's a sign to me that you're getting too much flow. If you're getting banged against your skeleton, you see them getting damaged, That's another sign to me. I like them to, move around, and they can kind of tumble over themselves a little bit, but you don't want them, like flipping, like you got a sheet of paper or driving down the interstate and you stuck your head out the window and that sheet of paper is flapping around. You don't want it going violently. Just some gentle flow moving around to keep them moving. Softies, I don't know that I've ever overlit a softie. I've had zoanthids grow from the bottom of my rocks all the way to the top in high par areas. Had zoanthids in high par areas. With softies, really it's more of a flow thing in a sense that the Gorgonians, they get too much flow and they get blown off the rock, or they're just bent over all the time. So you have to find a lower flow area where they're not getting much flow, or they're getting alternating flow, but not so much that they're bent over. That's an art when it comes to placing those, because if you have an SPS tank like I just had, you need lots of flow moving all around. Then you have the soft coral that moves really easily, and you don't want it to look like it's getting laid over by a tornado. So there's a mix there. Great question. Love mix it up with corals. Love mixed reef tanks. Love my sticks, but I mean, come on, we can have it all. Why not do it? All right, Leo C. You're on, Leo. Have at it. You gotta unmute your mic, Leo. No. All right, we'll come. Oh, there he is.
Is that me, Mark?
That's you.
Hey, good to be with you again, Mark. I raised my hand, but I liked the softies too earlier. I guess it stayed on. But yeah, I do. I'm getting a lot out of your coral placement. Mine's starting to get overgrown with big Monty caps. I got one that's about the size of a basketball, and
awesome.
He casts a lot of shade. He's really, really, really nice, But I've had to trim him back with just, it's kind of sad, man, when you just knock off size of a hand, and toss it, because just can't really do anything with it. But I do understand like how you have to trim it back. But I'm having a problem now with a Mystic Monty that I had on my back wall, and it's been growing, and for years it's been doing great, and all of a sudden it's bleaching out, and I really don't see if something's stinging it, or if something could be irritating it. I'm just not sure what could be going on with it. I'm looking to see if anything's nibbling on it, or so. I don't see any signs of that. And I have a coral, a SPS, but it's kind of a bushy type one. It's kind of close to it, but those don't send out stingers, do they?
No, I wouldn't expect that it's an SPS that's stinging it. I mean, unless it's actually like touching it, then I would be suspecting of it. The Mystic can be a tricky one. I had one in a client's tank that will grow and then bleach out. Is anything else in the tank struggling, or just the Mystic?
No, just the Mystic, and it's only been over like the last couple of weeks, and it started out like little patches, and it just seems to keep growing and growing and getting bigger and bigger on me.
So some things, this is one of the crazy things about coral, is you can take that Mystic, you can cut a frag, you can put it right next to it, and the mother colony might die, and the frag lives, or you can put the frag somewhere else in your tank and it lives, which drives me crazy. Sometimes being a type A, you're like, this makes absolutely no sense. If the mother colony is dying, then everything's going to be dying. You may just try another placement. Sometimes these things just bleach and then they stop. One thing, you may send off a Triton water test, ICPanalysis.com, either one of those, and they may tell you that something is off in your tank, maybe a lack of iodine, especially if you have a good amount of coral as well. That may be something that I've seen drop. Strontium, dosing those can be a little tricky. I just rather have you do a water change. But both of those are places that I would look for when it comes to bleaching like that. Thanks for the question, Leo. Not a bad problem to have, that everything is growing well. Before I forget, we were talking about corals, fragging corals, placing corals. We are having a sale. Here's the inside information. You're going to hear about it first. On Ocean Wonders stuff over at saltwateraquarium.com. So as you can see, we've got fragging tools, we've got glue, we've got frag plugs, we've even got epoxy. All this stuff is 10% off for the week over at saltwateraquarium.com. So if you have any fragging supplies that you need glue, epoxy, you're going to cut frags, Ocean Wonders has all that stuff, all kinds of fragging tools. It's all 10% off, so you can go grab that. All you have to do is type Ocean's Wonders in up here in the search, and then it will all pop up. It's what I just did here to show you everything, and it's all right there, and it's all on sale for 10% off. So get to fragging or get to placing corals if you're buying frags. Nothing wrong with just buying frags. I like to buy 1-inch frags, 1 or 2 inch frags, and let them go as opposed to buying something big. So 10% off to help you with your coral placement or fragging throughout the day, throughout the week. This is good for the week over at saltwateraquarium.com. Let's see here. Oh, we have a question from Rancid. Interesting name. I hope I didn't butcher your name. All right, Rancid, have at it.
Hey, Mark, how are you? It's Rashid, Stories Reef.
Oh,
first of all,
sorry about that.
It's not a problem. So great webinar, by the way. I've listened to all of them, including with Terrence, etc., and follow you literally on a regular basis. So thank you for putting these together.
Thank you.
I recently moved and finally got my semi-dream tank together, an 8-foot tank. And my main goal after watching, a lot of the BRS videos, following you and just trying to do this thing right, was a wall-to-wall SPS tank. But I really do love my soft Cordias, brain corals, and things of that sort. What is your advice in terms of what would you do with a client that really wants wall-to-wall SPS that have about 8 vortexes and 2 narrows and an 8-foot tank? And I really do get the flow up there, but it's been really hard for me to get the Recordias and those kind of softy corals that really, they do a lot better in my frag tank when I leave them there for a while. They really spread out. Should I just give up this, this need to try to get them in my main display tank and just go with mainly SPS with a cup of LPS like the torches that can handle it? Or is there a way around it where I could just tweak the flow, but I don't want to tweak the flow too much because I really like some of the vortexes down below where they really keep my detritus up. Because one last thing I forgot to mention, I don't have any sand. I know you're not a fan of that, but I have no sand, so it's a a sandless tank.
Okay, so don't give up. Those are some great corals that add a lot of personality, a lot of flair to your tank. I like to put them around the rocks in a place where the flow is coming around them, but they're kind of in the lee of the flow. And for example, this is where I had a rock flower anemone similar to the Recordias right here. So this is when my tank is new. So to give you some idea, when I put in that rock flower there, I had an MP60 here, I had an MP60 right here, and on the other side was an MP60 on either side, and then an MP40 down below. So flow was coming this way, from this way into that way. But there wasn't a lot of flow in the center of the rock work, so that's where I could put those type of corals. Flow would still come around the rock, but it's not directly blowing at the rock to give you some variety. So even if your tank is against a wall and you have power heads blowing from the back to the front, then still there's ways that you can find kind of lees, get in the lee of the flow, like the lee of the wind, same concept, and put those corals there. Now, the thing about Recordias, they're hard to get to attach. It takes some time. So it's great that you have a frag tank. So what I do is I get those little, actually I had one here, like the little 1 ounce cups you can get, to-go cups where they usually put sauces. I like to get those, put some rubble down in there, and then put the Recordia down inside the cup on the rubble. The rubble is going to hold the little cup down. The cup is going to give you a break in the flow. It's going to give the lee of the flow. The Recordia will attach to the rubble. Then you take the rubble out and you glue or epoxy it to the rock. You don't have to turn down the flow and wait for the weeks that it takes for that Recordia to attach. So don't give up on them. They can do well even in a high flow tank. You just got to be really strategic about where you put them. But don't give up on those corals. Those are fantastic. No, thanks for the reminder. I should put some of those in my new tank. I have not had some of those, certainly not a nice collection of those in a long time, and we can get them here in the United States out of Florida. Thanks for the reminder. All right, Robert Urich, you are on. Have at it, Robert.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me again tonight.
Thank you.
So, going with our last gentleman, I'm sticking with the bare bottom. I know you're not a fan. I'm in the larger nano, shooting for LPS and maybe a few Softie inverts, but I was kind of sold maybe on some beginner SPS after your discussion tonight. Thank you. And really, my question is what are some of your suggestions for the bottom of that bare bottom tank with some LPS that would be good beginners, don't spread out too much? You know, what are your thoughts?
For LPS?
I mean, I'm leaning more LPS than anything. I say majority LPS, but I know Zoas are a popular thing. I'm already thinking about that. I've just got a lot of shading in my rock work, my aquascape.
Okay.
I try to create a lot of crevices and places for my smaller fish. We talked about the first week. I'm stocking this thing like a nano, even though it's 50 gallons. So I'm gonna have a lot of small little places for them to hide. I just created a lot of shading with the rock work already. So I think I'm gonna have a lot of options when I'm choosing these corals. But I just wanted to see what you think is a good one to go for that bottom kind of encrusting, I guess is what I'm going for, really.
I mean, you can put some of these encrusting Montes down on the sand bed. Let me take a minute here and dig up some photos for you all. You can put some of those on the bottom of your bare bottom tank, and they will take off and encrust and grow on the tank. The Worldwide Corals guys are all, they're big into bare bottoms. So they've done it on your tank, on their tanks. I'm looking for a photo, just a second. So that's one thing that you can do is to put SPS, encrusting SPS on the bottom, and they will take off and run on the bottom of the tank. And I'm just digging up, I'm looking for a photo, because once I see it, it will make sense. So that's one thing that I would do. Your torches, your SPS, they can all go on the bottom as well. That's one that works really well on the bottom. Sometimes they're a little tricky because of the base. Some of them come on like a big flat disc, which is cool, but some of them, like the walls, are just cut, and they can be a little harder to get to hold still. So that's something to keep an eye on. I'm just looking at, I think this is, okay, so this is one photo. I think I have a better one. I'm just digging through old photos here, trying to find a good example. I think this is going to be the best example of it. Let me just get this to download here. All right. So, yes, this is a super cool chalice. Don't focus on this part of the photo. Look back here in the background. This is a Philia next to looks like some kind of encrusting Monte. There's some other Philia over here. You can see this ring here, the gap, that's where they're fighting, one's winning, one's losing. This is all on the bottom of the tank. This is encrusting on the bare bottom, something that I can't do because I like sand. Put those runners down on the bottom of the tank and let them go. Chalices could work as well. You could even do it with zoanthans. Let them run out on the bottom of your tank. That's something that, for me, it's a little different. I still like the look of sand over it. Some of these guys will actually grow over the sand. On my old 450-gallon tank, let's see if I have any photos of that. I can show you. The chalice actually grew off the rock, and then it grew onto the sand bed. It was actually overgrowing the sand when I took it out. Let me see if I can find a photo of that for you. Because that was actually, here, it's starting at this point. One thing I definitely didn't do, which you all should do, is take lots of photos of your tank. Even if you're not a good photographer, you can get an orange filter for your phone. These phones take pretty good photos right now, much better than when you used to have a DSLR. So this chalice is on the rock, and it's growing off the rock. It's going to go touch the sand bed and run across it. So that's another thing that you can do to fill up the bottom of the tank. That's all things that you can do with it, with the bare bottom, things that I don't get to do because I'm not a bare bottom guy. It's just not my taste. Each their own. There's no right or wrong, but for me, I like seeing the sand. Good luck with it. Congrats that you're having lots of success. I love to hear that. We're in this hobby to have fun. Hopefully it's having fun. Hopefully you all are getting some good quality time with your tanks at home, taking on the projects that you were thinking about but never really did, or you needed to do but you said you never had time. Now's a great time to do it. Let's go back over to the text questions, a couple more, and let's see here. Let's see. I'm just certain you guys have lots of good questions. Some of these have already been answered. That's a tough one. Let's see here. Rando wants to know, would I place the Philia in the sand or on a rock? All right, Randall, a sizable Philia I would place on top of the sand bed. But if you got like a 2 or 3 polyp frag, I wouldn't put that on the sand bed because it's very likely going to get buried or blown away, and then you're going to forget about it. If it was a sizable colony like this, then I'd put it down on the sand bed. They actually can sometimes look better on the sand bed because it's hard to put a coral that's like this, especially an LPS or those SPS, those Philias, on a rock and make it look normal. It always just kind of looks like you stuck it in there, and it's like, that doesn't look normal. So a larger piece, yes, on the sand. The little polyp frags, that's a great opportunity to put them on the rockwork because then they're going to grow around to the rockwork and look very natural. Just keep in mind, Philias tend to grow slow, so you got to be patient. Give it time. Great question. Love Philias. There's some really cool ones out there, and I just recommended some to a client today. Just know they grow slow, but man, they look really cool when you take some photos. Speaking of, let's go see if I can find that photo since you're talking about Philias and we're talking about reference photos. Let's see if I can pull that out because in my old tank, so a couple photos that are just jumping up here. This one, here's some nice, where'd you go? Come back. Just a second. When did you, my computer is confused. Just a second. So I will come back to that if I get back to it tonight. All right, so here we go. Now are you going to play nice? You're going to play nice. So zoanthids, all next to one another. They're happy as can be. They're even down there next to that Philia. That's the Philia, the growth shot I'm looking for. I started that Philia as a 2 polyp frag. It grew and grew and grew, and it grew on the contours of the rock, so it looked really natural. It looked really neat. It's playing nice with the zoanthids. The zoanthids are playing nice with one another. You got all this color right next to one another. Super cool. You can put those on a bare bottom tank as well. They're not going to grow on the sand by themselves, but they will do well in a bare bottom type of tank. Let me find, sorry, I just want to find this growth shot because that will really show the point that I'm trying to make here. There we go. Just a second. These are all my reference photos. Tell me you're in here because everyone's going to get upset. Hey, look, day one. Where is this thing? Just a second. Just a second. Just a second. I'll get there. Where did you go? That was one coral I actually took growth photos, growth shots of, which you should do because it's really fun and enjoyable to see the success that you have. But if you don't take photos, it's not going to happen. Where is that thing? This is making me mad. I'm going to have to bring this up next week because I can't find it. Well, there's one. Okay. We're getting there. This is not too long after I had it. All right, so here's the same Philia. Right now it's got, oh, I don't know, 20 or so polyps growing on this rock. It started from a two or three polyp frag. It's starting to dome over. You can see like on the bottom where the polyp is kind of squishing down on the coral or on the live rock. So it looks very natural. It looks very grown in. You get some of these Philias that are on this disc. You can't just stick it there. You'll see all that disc. It's going to look really weird. It's going to look really poor. Let me see if I have another shot of that. And then I'm going to give up and go to the next question. Here's another thing. Take lots of photos and organize them very well. Do it as soon as you take it. Take the ones you like and organize them. I definitely don't do that as much as you can see tonight. Organize them together in whatever photo program you have. You don't have to be a pro user to do that, but keep them organized. Here we go. You're just mixed in there with everyone else. Here's the same coral now overgrowing the rock. I don't know how many polyps it is at this point, but you can see it's now curling over that same piece of live rock. So it looks very natural. That's a great thing to do with Philias when they're smaller because they melt over the rock and they look really cool, just like that. Know that that's, okay, so that's August 17th. Let me show you in terms of, remember I told you it takes time. That's August 2017. The photo that I was showing you before. Let me tell you the date stamp on that guy. Once I can find it. All right. That was it when I started. That's the same coral in January of 2016. A year and a half earlier. You can actually see the plug. And the other photos I showed you, it's growing off the plug. It's encrusting this little guy down below it. So a year and a half to get from this to get to approximately double. It takes time with Philias, but to me, that's cool. It shows your progress, and just be patient with this thing. All right, last question. Let's see here. We have a young reefer with us tonight, 12 years old. Thanks for being here. Trying to start a nano. 2 questions. Depending on shade and light, what corals would you recommend to start for a nano? The quick answer to that is zoanthids and some gorgonians. Gorgs you can usually get smaller, but they move in the flow, which is super cool. They're easy to keep. They're very forgiving. Zoanthids are very easy to keep, very forgiving as well. Love both of those for a nano, both those for starters as well. Lights and flow, do you have any filters and lighting that I can use? So don't know what type of nano you have, what type of lighting you're using. So if you're looking for a specific light for nano, the current USA loop lights, we've had lots of success with those. We had great success with that in the LPS tank, the Softie tank at SaltwaterAquarium.com in our budget build series. That works really well. In terms of filters with a nano, a lot of times, depending on how the nano is built, it's whatever you get in the back chamber. Maybe you can add a hang-on back. A lot of times, that's all you need. Everything will be happy with that. You don't have room for a skimmer. You don't really have room for media reactors. Water change is going to be your friend because you can do a 5-gallon water change in a nano and probably get a 50% water change underneath your belt. A great way to get started. Nanos, there's some give and take there in terms of parameter swinging, but if you start with some Softie corals, just do a big water change once or twice, once a week or once every other week. You'll probably be fine. And then what's going to happen, you're going to graduate up. It always happens when you have success. Nothing wrong with that. Just show your parents that you're working hard with it and that you enjoy it. That's the best thing you can do. Besides earning your own money, get them behind you too to grow into the next one because it always happens. Not a bad thing. Thanks for being in the hobby young. I hope you are enjoying it. I hope you're full of energy and learning as much as you can. That got me very interested in science in school was what I learned from chemistry, from learning about the nitrogen cycle in a saltwater tank. So good luck with the journey. Thanks everyone for being with me on a Sunday night. We are back next Sunday evening, same time, 8:30 Central. I'm going to post another poll up in the Saltwater Insiders group on Facebook to get everyone's feedback. If you're not a Facebooker, that's fine. Send us an email at sales@saltwateraquarium.com. Don't forget about the 10% off the Ocean Wonders kits, frag plugs, glue, anything Ocean Wonders is 10% off over at saltwateraquarium.com for the week. With that, thanks for being here. Have a great night. Thanks for being with me. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Enjoy your tanks. Wash your hands. I'll catch you next week.